course, we discuss various disparities in the criminal justice system concerning race and ethnicity, occupation, location, and socioeconomic status. A demographic that is highly overlooked, discriminated, and unfairly punished in the American criminal justice system are African American women. This module will discuss how African American women are discriminated against and will touch on the history of this topic, statistics that demonstrate these disparities, as well as psychological studies that have touched on this topic. Surprisingly, gendered racism in the criminal justice system has only recently been researched in the past 2 to 3 decades. Lawrence French, in his book, A Profile of the Incarcerated Black Female Offender, says that women are ignored in the criminal justice system and research and literature because male criminologists fail to consider female criminality as a worthwhile topic of research and discussion. Another factor is that the way in which criminal justice is administered and how it has historically been focused and studied has been by and for males. Female criminology is a very recent and still widely unresearched area of criminology. This is important in that it highlights how there are still many areas and factors yet to be uncovered. Also, in considering how general female criminology has greatly been overlooked, it is safe to assume that Black female criminology is even more so untouched. This oversight is significant because Black female criminal trends are at the intersection of multiple disadvantages and life stressors. Understanding Black female criminology can lead to necessary prison reform and community support for Black women and girls. As we've discussed consistently throughout this course, racial differences infect our criminal justice system at every level. From police questioning to arrests, charges, convictions, sentencing, and parole, Black and Hispanics are horribly overrepresented in comparison to whites. When it comes to Black women in particular, there are increasingly more disproportionate convictions of Black women in comparison to white women. Women's incarceration rates in general have grown 108% from 1981 to 2000, but 1 out of every 18 Black women are incarcerated at one point in their lifetime, compared to 1 out of every 111 white women. Think of this statistic realistically by placing yourself in a row of 18 women, knowing one of you will be incarcerated for any given amount of time because of the way you look. Think of how many more women are in a row of 111 versus 18, yet none of the women in the row of 111 will be arrested due to their physical appearance. Black women are 2.5 times more likely to be incarcerated than white women, and almost as likely as white males to be incarcerated, yet Black women make up less than 7% of the U.S. population. We can assume that the more people know about this appalling statistical disparity, the more aware those in power will be and understand the role race has for women throughout the criminal justice system. Many psychologists who have studied gendered racism believe that racial disparities exist in the criminal justice system in general because women have greater societal responsibilities as mothers, and therefore their criminal activity is more costly for their families and communities. So by not following these societal norms and responsibilities might increase Black women's likelihood of arrest and continuous involvement in the criminal justice system. This, along with the fact that Black women are unfairly targeted by police and members of society at large, as well as other stressors such as health, finance, social network loss, and victimization, all add to this continuous and disproportionate criminal cycle. We will touch more on these stressors later, but essentially Black women have various factors working against them, which are unfairly enhanced when they go against societal expectations. There are 2 sociological hypotheses concerning gendered racism in the criminal justice system that those in power as well as the general public tend to side with. The first is the differential involvement hypothesis, which suggests that racial differences in the criminal justice system occur because Black people commit more crimes and participate in more criminal activity in general than whites. The differential selection hypothesis, on the other hand, suggests that both Black and white people are equally as likely to engage in criminal activity, but on the macro scale, certain factors such as more urban and poorer environments on average for Black people, more police patrol in Black areas, and general racism in the criminal justice system make Black people more likely to be arrested and processed for crimes. Which do you think is a more prominent perspective in America at large? Now, which do you think is a more prominent perspective for those in judiciary powers such as judges, prosecutors, and cops? How do you think a shift in perspective, particularly by people in power, changed the gender and race proportions in the criminal justice system? These are important questions to consider in examining how gendered and general racism in the criminal justice system perpetuates and the real-life consequences it imposes on Black women in particular. To show the real-life repercussions of gendered racism, Enos in 2012 conducted a literary analysis on mass incarceration for women of color. Enos found that many white middle-aged men who either have arresting power, police, or judicial power, judges and lawyers, tend to give less severe punishments to white women because they fit the gentle, loving mother physical stereotype. Black women, on the other hand, are stereotyped as ghetto, aggressive, confrontational, and uneducated, making them more likely to be arrested, charged, and convicted of crimes than white women. The color of their skin puts them behind bars, essentially. Enos also examined the connection between the differential selection hypothesis and poverty, and found that Black women are more likely than white women to live in poverty and high crime areas, and are subsequently disadvantaged. Because of this, Black women are more likely to be arrested for nonviolent crimes than white women are. Poverty puts Black women at risk for less opportunity, public assistance, single motherhood, substance abuse, as well as other psychological stressors that make them more likely to be arrested than white women. To examine the real-life presence of gendered racism in the criminal justice system, Walt and Jason conducted a study in 2017 to see if race predicted the degree to which women were involved in the criminal justice system. They collected data on women in large cities across the U.S. who were formerly involved in the criminal justice system and also participated in some sort of substance abuse recovery. They sampled 200 female participants averaging 40 years old, 75% of which were Black and 25% were white. It's important to note that the overrepresentation of Black women in their study sample reflects how Black women are disproportionately represented in the criminal justice system, particularly those in large urban cities. Walt and Jason found that race was a factor in determining the number of times participants were arrested, as well as how long they were incarcerated for. Black women reported an average of 20 arrests in their lifetime, while white women reported only 7. Black women also reported an average of 53 months incarcerated in their lifetime, while white women reported only 27 months. Their white participants were also on average more educated, had been employed for longer, and had more resources. The study also found that race affected the likelihood of being charged for a crime after being arrested, so white women were let off the hook by police officers more than Black women were. We mentioned certain social and psychological stressors that disproportionately affect Black women and enhance their likelihood of a criminal involvement. Lincoln Ozer in 2019 investigated the relationship between stressors such as employment, finances, illness, social network loss, child victimization, and gendered racism, and using criminal thinking as a coping strategy for these stressors. We mentioned before how economic disadvantage is a stressor that is linked to racial discrimination and institutionalization, which disproportionately affects Black women and criminally involved Black women especially. Health disparities, such as how mental health is a more prominent issue among Black women than white women, as well as less access to health care and support, is another stressor that targets Black women. Social network loss refers to how African Americans have higher mortality rates for many leading causes of death in the U.S., and so Black women's social groups experience more loss on average, leading to marital failures, parentless children, and psychological stress. Victimization refers to the fact that 4 out of every 10 Black women experience physical or sexual abuse by a partner at some point in their lifetime, added on to the fact that low-income women have less resources to recover and get help. Finally, racism is recognized as being a major source of chronic stress for African Americans. Gendered racism in particular affects employment, opportunities, and mental health. Lincoln Ozer identified these as major stressors for Black women and conducted a survey to see the extent to which their participants experienced any number of these stressors, and then this led them to criminal thinking. Lincoln Ozer defined criminal thinking as the thought content and process conducive to the initiation and maintenance of habitual law-breaking behavior. The more criminal thinking a person engages in, the more likely they are to manifest those thoughts. Negative life experiences can lead to the likelihood of criminal thinking, such as the stressors we mentioned. Lincoln Ozer found that household income, drug use, and gendered racism were the most influential stressors on criminal thinking, although they found that all stressors presented a positive correlation with criminal thinking. So it's fair to conclude that Black women are put at a societal disadvantage due to their skin color, which disproportionately in comparison to white women leads them to poverty and a number of other stressors. This enhances their tendency to turn to criminal activity due to desperation, pain, lack of resources, lack of opportunity, and other positive outlets. To conclude, female criminality, and particularly Black female criminality, are topics that deserve to be recognized, researched, and discussed. In order to raise awareness for the plethora of disparities this topic uncovers, and in the hopes that criminal justice reform will begin to take place. Psychologists and their research have shown that gendered racism is a significant societal and criminal justice issue that puts Black women, an already at-risk population, at a significant disadvantage across various contexts and increases their likelihood of incarceration and a vicious cycle of criminal activity. This issue can be improved with more research and general exposure to this topic.